Welcome to the new Toy Train Revue. We have a great show for you. 23 years ago, we produced our first story on Terry Johnson's layout. We stopped by recently to see what's new. American Flyer expert Bob Bubeck examines the origins and impact of the pre-war American Flyer 3/16 scale O-gauge trains. Our old pal Kerry Williams is bringing live steam 15-inch gauge trains back to life in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Tom Robinson's scale S-gauge layout features American Flyer post-war accessories and modern-era scale S-gauge locomotives. Greg Annett's layout captures the gritty feel of the big city. Bob Olsen's O-scale trolley layout recreates his hometown of Brooklyn, back in the days when the Dodgers were still the Brooklyn Dodgers. So let's get started. First, an update on Terry Johnson. We first met Terry Johnson back in the fall of 1991 when we were producing our first Toy Train Revue Part 3. Now that we're working on our second Toy Train Revue Part 3, we decided it would be fun to visit Terry once again to see how things have changed in the last 23 years.
This layout, I wanted to make it look more like a high rail layout rather than my older layout, which was more toy-like. I wanted a layout where you could walk in and around with trains going a lot of different places at one time. My track plan has two major loops that are interconnected. So I've got a lower loop and an upper loop, and the lower loop rises to meet the upper loop at a double crossover, and then the upper loop goes on higher above that yet. So I have, it looks like 3 or 4 levels, which are actually 2 loops that go up and down and intertwine. And then I also have 2 other dedicated loops which are around knee level, so little kids have trains to view. These are just loops that are independent, that don't have any turnouts or anything. I think I re-entered the toy train hobby in 1987 when Lionel started, when Richard Kuhn bought business and did a lot of really neat things. So I had quite a few Lionel things, but in 91, I think, at the York Train Show is where I bought my first MTH locomotive, and I was kind of hooked on that from then on. So I think the MTH run a lot better on conventional than the Lionel. I don't want to start a fight with the Lionel guys, but I can get a lot slower operation with my MTH. So I prefer MTH. It took only about 2.5 years to get from an unfinished basement to the way it looks now. Sound cards, I have a lot of those. I've got a track gang. I've got some hobos around a fire. Little super detailing like that is what you can spend a lot of time with now, and that's a big part of the hobby for me. Plus showing it to people. I rarely come down and operate trains, but I do whenever people are in town or want to see it. That's the fun when I get, is showing it off. And I love having TM Books and Video come and do an interview.
Terry had James Bond's 1967 thriller, You Only Live Twice, on his mind when he buried a 175 rocket launcher inside his mountain.
My Area 51 is kind of an excuse to have my 175 Lionel rocket launcher still on the set, but I wanted to utilize it because it's kind of a fun toy, and I buried it into a mountain underneath a movable lake, kind of like James Bond movies would have had, and the villain can lay siege to the world from the depths of his cavern via Area 51. So I got the idea of just making a black and white. Color does not escape that area for some reason. I don't know why.
Speaking of movies, Terry has added special effects to his layout that dazzle and delight his guests of all ages.
I love Disney World, and I loved all the special effects that they go there. And I'm the guy, when they go through Disney World and everyone's looking straight ahead, I'm looking around behind me to see how they do that, you know, with the black lights and things like that. So I have a sunset bulb that actually gets brighter. It's red in color. It gets brighter, then it dissipates. At that time, the stars are out, so I've got a couple lasers that actually project stars over the ceiling. Then the storm starts, the wind that's blowing. At that point, the stars go away, the clouds come out, and then all the lightning, 5 lightning projectors. Got a rain projector, and then the tornado starts. So I have the air raid sirens in the background, and the tornado moves slowly across the sky. You hear crickets again. The sun comes up, you see some morning fog. You see a rainbow right after the rooster crows, and then you start hearing birds and all of the city sounds throughout the next day. Is that enough? I've got Gargrave's Flex Track, and I have Ross custom switches with NJ switch machines on Rick's racks under the counter. I think there's 18 trains that I can run without having to take anything off or on the track, even though there's only 4 loops. I've got a lot of sidings. Some of them are 18 feet long, and people don't want to watch you try to re-rail stuff and take them off or on. I want a lot of stuff being able to run at any one time, and that's the fun of having kids down. You let them point to the one they want to run, and that's kind of their way of participating with this. The lift bridge I made out of erector sets. The Lionel bridge was too small. I didn't like the lift bridges that had the connection between the 2 towers to hold everything together. I wanted them independent like a real one was. So I went into my number 12.5 erector set, got a lot of the wide girders, 4 different erector set motors on top, and I built the lift bridge from scratch, other than the movable span, which was a 30-inch long Atlas single-track truss bridge.
All the other bridges were scratch-built by Terry out of wood.
The mountains are kind of what they usually do. It's plaster Paris over a matrix of like masking tape and a wood frame. I use plaster Paris soaked paper towels, place them on the matrix of tape and wood, and then brush on layers of plaster over that. I'll use rock molds from latex molds. I'll use foam in some cases and make the rock work, and then spray it all with RIT dyes and sprinkle on different pigments and different textures of ground cover and sand and things. Some of my mountains look like the birthday cake effect, and I'm not crazy about that look necessarily. I think John Allen did a lot better job on scenery than I have. The layout's 27 feet by 27 feet, but that's still not enough to have an 072 minimum radius and a rather large layout. Other than that, I'm pretty happy with the way everything's turned out. The operating accessories I have all on push buttons, so especially when children come, or adults also, whoever I have, they get to operate them themselves. All of them are off of one transformer, so I can vary the voltage to each one. Since they all operate independently, never simultaneously, I can adjust the voltage as necessary and make sure the milk cans don't go blowing out of the milk car. They all operate very well, thank you. Jim Barrett, actually Rich Melvin, said, "These are the best accessories I've ever seen work."
Trains were a part of Terry's youth.
And probably what got me interested in trains was being out west, because we would ride the train back to my relatives in Illinois and come back and bother them on the farms in the summertime. So we'd ride the Rock Island Rocket, brought us into Galesburg, Illinois. My poor uncle and grandfather would pick us up, and we'd ride tractors for 2 weeks bothering them.
Terry compares the hobby today to the hobby he remembers back in 1991.
The hobby has changed a lot since then. I wanted a toy train layout then. I think a lot of guys are going to high rail, and a lot of them are doing the electronics. MTH and Lionel both have TMC, C, and DCS. The talking locomotives and electronics. That's the only hope for keeping youth in the hobby, I think, or the electronics, if they have a shot at it at all. It's an aging hobby, everyone knows that. I didn't buy the trains as an investment. I didn't buy any trains I didn't like. And when I'm done, if they're not worth anything, I still have a lot of nice toys. If they're worth something, that's fine. But I've heard a lot of train guys say that their family, when they talk about what are they going to do with Dad's train collection or toy collection when something happens to him, they're just hoping they're not the one that inherits it.
Terry faced a crisis early in his life. In 1966, his family decided to move from Arizona to Michigan. They packed all their belongings in a '59 Chevy and a U-Haul truck. Space was scarce, and there was no room for Terry's Tonka trucks or even his dog, Ouija. So Terry had to leave all his toys and his pal Ouija in Arizona.
We didn't have any money, and my dad moved from Arizona to Michigan, and I left my dog Ouija and all my Tonka trucks there. And I didn't know any better. I don't think you're allowed to do that anymore. You'd sue your parents. But I thought that was normal. You're never too old to have a happy childhood, right? I don't have need for more trains. I buy very few trains now. I've got a weed spraying set from MTH, which is kind of cool. I like some of the maintenance away stuff. I got a track detector car, which is kind of fun to run, something different than the big trains.
Terry likes unit trains and the colors of the Southern Pacific. He acquired an SP F3 ABA in Black Widow colors and teamed it with MTH tank train cars, even though those cars were never headed by an SP F3 diesel.
That's the beauty of a model railroad. It's my world. I do what I want. I think I'm an operator a lot more than a collector. I'll operate anything. Yeah, I'm an operator.
Terry may be an operator in the train world, but he also has the heart of a collector. He has a nice 1/32 scale slot car set up. And remember those Tonka trucks and farm toys he had to leave in Arizona? Well, looks like he has more than made up for his loss.
So I've got a lot of Tonka trucks and farm toys. I just started collecting Matchbox cars again. So a lot of the toys that I had as a kid that I had to leave out west when we moved from Tucson, I've bought a lot of those back and I've got them on display, and I enjoy those too. They don't run, they're not as fun as a train, but they're cool.
Terry, a true Renaissance man, also plays the drums. And oh, by the way, Terry still collects hats.
Yeah, I collect hats. I don't know why. Yeah, okay, cool. Green screens. You must be tired. I'm not afraid of it. I just don't really see a need in it, and you see sheets of rain, and then the tornado starts. I did not close it down. Those are the only things I don't collect. Yeah. Oh, the lift bridge. Look like an idiot. YMCA. We can add that part way through and it'll be muffled. Something different. Si, senor.
Now, Terry, I know you don't want to offend anyone, but tell us the truth. Who's better, Lionel or MTH?
Oh, well, anytime with MTH, I like Lionel as well.
Okay, that's a wrap.
William Coleman Jr., CEO of the Chicago-based American Flyer Manufacturing Company, and A.C. Gilbert, CEO of A.C. Gilbert Company, were pals, and in the summer of 1937, they were playing golf. A.C., whose company produced the Erector and Misto Magic sets, mentioned he wanted to expand his company to include HO model trains. Bill suggested he take over his American Flyer train line. They made the deal, shook hands, and the first A.C. Gilbert train catalog came out in 1938. It contained a new line of HO gauge model trains and carryover American Flyer O gauge toy trains. In 1939, Gilbert, who felt the train market was moving towards a more scale look and away from the toy look, introduced a new, more realistic line. called 3/16" scale trains for O-gauge track. AC's first two steam locomotives were good choices, a Union Pacific Northern and a New York Central J3A Hudson. In 1940, the 3/16 scale line was expanded, and the toy trains from the old Chicago Flyer were almost all discontinued. The 1941 American Flyer catalog contained the largest selection of 3/16 scale O-gauge trains ever produced. Toy train manufacturing was interrupted in 1942 when factories all over the country switched to production for the war effort. After the war, Gilbert switched from O-gauge track to S-gauge. The 3/16 scale trains looked prototypically correct on the new, narrower, two-rail track. S-gauge measures 7/8 of an inch between the rails. That's a perfect 3/16 scale match with the 4 feet 8 inch spacing of real track. On the steamers, new tooling was necessary for the trucks, motor frames, and steam chests. The steam chests of the O-gauge version stuck out and did not mesh with the model's scale look. On the new S-gauge steamers, the new steam chests meshed perfectly. And of course, new trucks were needed for all the rolling stock. And so began the toy train wars. Lionel 3-rail O-gauge trains against the more realistic-looking S-gauge trains that operated on 2-rail track, just like real trains. It was a hard-fought battle, but Lionel, with its better marketing, more dealers, and irresistible catalog illustrations, won. In 1953, the best year for both companies, Lionel sales were 33 million. American Flyer, 19 million. And that included sales of erector sets, Misto Magic sets, chemistry sets, and Gilbert's line of small household appliances. Now let's turn it over to our main flyer guy, Bob Bubeck. Bob will cover a nice assortment of 3/16 O-gauge trains made by American Flyer between 1939 and 1941.
The first set was a 4004 set, which is headed up by a 553 metallic gray streamline engine, which is the same die casting, if you will, as the more famous Royal Blue. In this instance, the collectors call it the Royal Gray. And it has a log car, a tank car, and a caboose, all sheet metal. And it was at the time a quite affordable set. The 553 Royal Gray is somewhat tough to find in nice shape because it was only made 1 year. The next set is an example of a top-end set where Hudson J3A, New York Central, and 4 die-cast cars, a B&O box car, a gondola, a wrecker with a die-cast chassis, and a die-cast caboose stamped NYC. This was a top-of-the-line set. It had directional control as opposed to the usual E-unit in terms of controlling the reverse, and that was actuated with a DC offset. The third set is the 4024, and that is headed up by one of the most significant model toy engines in the pre-war period, a Northern. And in terms of wheel count, this was actually a bigger engine than anything Lionel had. And it was also a very accurate model of a Union Pacific 800 class Northern. And that engine also has the special directional control, and it heads up 3 die-cast heavyweights, very scale in appearance, not quite in length, but scale in appearance. We also showed a model of a Pennsylvania Railroad K5, and that's the 561. That particular engine combination is from 1941, and we did put together a nice sheet metal freight train behind it, which includes the armored car unloading car. And our particular sample also has a tender with a chugger in it, which is a piston system driven by a motor. American Flyer post-war smoke units were inspired by the mechanical arrangement of a chugger. Why not put a heating element on it and run a tube from the tender all the way up the boiler to the smokestack? In neutral, smokes quite profusely, like a real steam engine. We also showed two examples in the low-end range. One train is pulled by a number 401 steam engine, as Gilbert cataloged it, which is really one of the latest carryovers from Chicago Flyer. And also, although a fun sort of little steam engine, you can readily see that it's a bit clumsy looking. Then in 1941, that engine went by the boards, and in its stead was a Reading Atlantic, and is a decent model of a Reading P7 PSA. So at that point, by 1941, the line had now been very much converted to the 3/16 scale O-gauge system. If I was to pick the holy grail of this entire line of trains, it is the 4129 yard goat set, which is headed up with the 080 switcher and has 4 die-cast cars. First of all, that engine was made only 1 year. Not very many of them were made. And what's worse, a defective batch of die-cast metal was used in making those switchers. And so a lot of them are either swollen or disfigured or disintegrated. So if you were to find a boxed 4129 set, that would be truly surprising. In an attempt to have more scale-like accessories, they also came up with a target block signal, a semaphore, and a crossbuck crossing flasher, all of which were close in scale and size, fitting a 3/16 inch scale line of trains. One of the accessories that we showed in operation was the famous track gang. In the process of changing the trains to a more scale appearance, several of the new accessories were also more compatible with that size as well. It is an accessory that was made only in 1941. In this day and age, a nice operator sample might be something like $1,500. Just to let you know how crazy the bidding can get on this accessory once in a while, one sold for $3,000.
Other scale-looking accessories carried over from the 3/16 O-gauge line were the Acousticon station, water tank, whistling billboard, and wayside station. The 3/16 scale O-gauge trains made just before World War II represent an often overlooked and neglected niche in the world of toy train collecting. We hope this segment sheds a little light and understanding for a unique type of O-gauge trains that most of us are only dimly aware. Also, we want to acknowledge the vital role 3/16 O-gauge trains played in the historic progression of toy trains. They were the harbinger of all the great American Flyer S-gauge trains produced in the post-war era.
We first met Kerry Williams back in 1978 when we were doing research on our Lionel standard gauge book. Kerry specialized in early period Lionel was considered one of the most knowledgeable collectors in the country and had a fine collection. The surprising thing was that Carey was only 18 years old and had just graduated from high school. Carey never lost interest in trains, and in 2004, he started reading a series of articles by Andy Jugel in the Train Collectors Quarterly about amusement park trains. Those articles sparked a memory. As a kid, Carey's favorite day out was to go to Kittyland in Melrose Park, Illinois, and ride the steam train.
Growing up as a small child, they would bring out the steam engines, the beautiful Wagner steam engines. And when you're very short and you're looking up at these marvelous, mammoth engines, they made an indelible impression on me. So 2004, Andy Jugel had just written a series of articles about park trains. I started reading those, and I went, wow, I don't have to admire these anymore, I can buy one. I love collecting things, I love doing research, and I love traveling around and meeting people. So I started traveling across the country and meeting people, going to different railroads and buying various trains.
Turns out Carey wasn't buying just trains. In 2009, Eden Springs Amusement Park, located in Benton Harbor, Michigan, was for sale. The House of David, a religious community, opened Eden Springs Park in 1908, and miniature trains played a big part in the park's rich history.
To purchase Eden Springs Park was made available. The ability to try to save something that was historic and dovetailed with my hobby, and to be able to open it up for the public kind of all melded together. So to try to save something for the community and be able to have other future generations be able to enjoy it. For every Sunday now, I have 100 people or so come on and jump on the train and go for a ride. So I get to share my hobby with all these wonderful smiling kids and parents, and they're grateful, and I'm grateful they come. And you think I had a plan? Well, I wouldn't go that far. The vision or the plan was to form a nonprofit. So we formed the Eden Springs Park Preservation to operate and preserve the park. The park is a very, very long-term project, but we fortunately have gotten some wonderful volunteers. A lot of grassroots effort, that people that grew up in the park and then they saw that it had closed for 35 years, and they saw we were working hard. We put the small little loop of track in, and we opened it up. The first weekend we had 1,800 people there, which is absolutely incredible. And the little Cagney did a great job pulling people around and around and around for 2 days. It was a wonderful event, and you could really feel the magic in the air with that many people in the park.
Eden Springs Park was one of the most exciting amusement parks in America. It attracted huge crowds and foreshadowed today's theme parks like Disneyland and Great America. Attractions included a small zoo, band shell, beer garden, baseball stadium, miniature race cars, Duck Island, and an outdoor theater. But the main attraction was the miniature railroad, headed by Class D heavyweight 15-inch gauge locomotives made by the Cagney Locomotive Works of Niagara Falls, New York. Originally, the Eden Springs Park steamers traveled along a beautiful mile-long route, winding through forests on both sides of a lush valley. The trip included crossing over the valley on 2 trestle bridges. The trestles still stand today, but they are both in need of major renovation. Work has already started on the East Trestle, which is 24 feet high and 200 feet long. The longer, higher West Trestle is 28 feet high and 325 feet long. It was a thrill to travel across those high bridges on rails 15 inches apart. But Eden Springs Park had been abandoned since 1973, and what greeted Carey and his merry band of volunteers was a dense Michigan jungle of trees, weeds, bushes, and poison ivy.
We've taken down thousands and thousands of trees, the nasty tree of heavens, and we have bamboo growing there. It was a forest. The park had been stripped. They had sold off all the trains, they sold off all the engines, sold off all the rail. There was nothing in the engine house. It was barren.
Carrie wanted to get the trains rolling as soon as possible. Crossing the valley would have to wait, so Carrie settled for a 1,000-foot loop on the south side of the valley. Adults pay $2, kids are free, and you get to go around the 1,000-foot loop twice.
But it shows the people kind of the overview of the park, and it shows the trestles and the potential of what we can do in the future. And I thought it was important to be able to show that we are involved, we're here to stay, and we have something that can share it with their family and bring back memories for themselves.
After clearing a path, the next job was laying track.
And you lay out the ties, you put down a mesh on the ground so weeds don't grow through it. You lay a little bit ballast to kind of bring you up off the ground a little bit. And then you throw out your ties, and then you drag out the rail, the 32-foot long pieces of rail, and you line that all up and you gauge it, and then we use lag bolts with spacers to hold it down to the ties. We don't use spikes. And then you pitch it a little bit so on the curves it's a little higher on the outside. The track crew, they're wonderful and great, and they have it down to a science now.
It's a gorgeous summer day, a slight breeze and blue skies. Carrie is firing up his 1904 440 Cagney steamer for a day on the high iron.
So you have to punch the flues, clean those, and then clean out the firebox, get out the ashes and the cinders, close it all up. You start your fire with wood to get it warm enough to start warming up the boiler, and then once you get about 75 pounds of pressure, 80 pounds of pressure, then you can start transferring over to coal, which burns far more efficiently and far hotter.
It takes about an hour and a half to get the boiler pressure up to between 130 pounds and 150 pounds, which is where Carrie likes to operate. All fired up, folks are waiting, ready to go. The Cagney heads out from the engine house, over switches, onto the 1,000-foot main line. First stop, the South Station, where passengers are waiting to board. The whistle toots twice, indicating it's time to start rolling. The Cagney heads east from the station, then winds around under a canopy of trees at the east end of the loop, then past what used to be a hotel, over the Green Girder Bridge, around the far west end of the loop, then back into the South Station, where it keeps on going because you get to go around twice for your $2 ticket.
South Depot that we run through is in the original location, and parts of it are probably original from 1908, but they ended up rebuilding the station a couple times with the different roof lines. So the station as it is now kind of looks like more like the 1932 version. The cars that we have were made by the Boschke Carriage Company in Benton Harbor, so they're original to the park. The ones that we were running on was about circa 1911.
After World War II, diesels replaced steamers on the real railroads. Same with the Kittyland railroads. Kids wanted to ride behind the shiny new diesels, so kiddie parks all over the country traded in their old steam engines for sleek models of EMD's F3 diesels, made by the Miniature Train Corporation of Bradenton, Florida. The miniature F3s were powered by a Wisconsin 4-cylinder engine. The Hodges hand cars are a big hit with the kids.
Immediately after World War II, when all these Kittylands popped up, a gentleman by the name of Hodges down in Indianapolis came up with these little hand cars. It's a lot of fun to see the kids enjoy these rides, bring as much enjoyment today as they did when they were brand new.
The engine house is another work in progress.
The building goes back to probably about 1908, but it's been used as an engine house probably since the 20s. We're very, very fortunate to have the engine house. It's very functional, it's very practical, it's very pragmatic. The engine house has 8 tracks wide. 4 of the tracks go over a pit, so you could run the steam engines over there and you could stand underneath and service the trains. It's an incredibly valuable servicing ability. Right now we only have 2 operating tracks. Hopefully by the end of the year we'll have up to 4 tracks operational, and then a couple more years we'll get all 8 of them operational.
Volunteer Phil Prentkowski is a handy guy to have around. He came up with the scrap steel to build the green girder bridge, and Phil also built this little putt-putt he affectionately calls the speeder. Phil loves to zip around the track just for fun, but it's not all fun and games for the speeder.
Pulled about a mile of rail with it this year, and it's able to pull, 2 tons of rail. When we were doing the ballasting, and we hooked up a hopper car which had 3 scoops full from the Bobcat, but it's a real workhorse. And Phil's he's a great asset to our railroad.
The miniature race cars were another big attraction. 2 of the original cars have been restored and are being driven today by volunteers Neil Boretsky and Matt Seigers. This is the original track located in the valley near the East Trestle. In 1934, the park built 12 miniature race cars patterned after early Indy 500 cars. They were painted bright colors and were popular because kids loved to race them around the track. These 2 restored cars are all original except for the engines. They ride rough, but they steer easily and they're fun to drive. Neil Boretsky, who is in charge of the restorations, is on the lookout for the remaining 10 cars.
The public response has been very, very favorable. Very grateful to see that the park is being saved. They love taking the train ride again. They never thought they'd ride the train through the station again, and they come back year after year and see the progress. So it's a wonderful thing, and it's a fun thing to share, and it's great to see all the smiles on the kids' faces.
For the future, Kerry dreams of the day when he can cross the valley, steaming over both trestle bridges.
Well, we're all anxious to get that trestle up. So as soon as we get there, our east trestle up, take the train to the north side, we'll do the loop, and then we can bring them back across the trestle again. And then ultimately we want to be able to expand the railroad coming out in our front yard, which would bring it out to 139. So people that go driving by can see the train. And then we need to rebuild the west trestle, which is mammoth trestle. That'll be a bigger, far more expensive proposition. So again, we're hoping that the base keeps building and we get to some more generous donations. So hopefully by the end of 2015, we'll be able to go across the trestle with the train and loop around.
Same old story. As a kid, Tom Robinson liked S-gauge American Flyer trains. In his teens, his interest faded, and he sold his trains. Then about 35 years later, the train bug bit again, but this time more for the gauge than the train maker.
I would say that more than a Flyer fan, I'm an S-gauge fan. There's a little bit of a challenge in being an S-gauger because there's not as much available. However, for about the last 10 years, it's been the golden age of S-gauge. My opinion of the new American Flyer by Lionel, the last 2 have been terrific. The Challenger is probably the best engine I've ever had by any manufacturer. The electronics, the most they've ever put into a S-gauge train. It has the full legacy system in it, and it is a scale model, which the big boy was not. It's a big commitment for Lionel to put this into a minority gauge.
Tom's layout measures 15 by 16 feet. 5 trains operate on 4 main lines, and on a fifth loop in the roundhouse and yard area. The center of the layout is a tribute to Tom's favorite road name, the Nashville and Tennessee Central Railway. The terminus for the Tennessee Central is Harriman. Tom is in the process of changing this area, which now has a toy train look, to a more realistic look in keeping with the rest of the layout. He plans on adding scenery and replacing the Plasticville buildings with scale building kits.
I'm not a senior person. I have seen the layout best I can.
For the mountains, Tom used crumpled up newspapers covered with 2 layers of plaster cloth. Then he added a coat of Sculptamold, then painted using earth tones, then adding Woodland Scenics ground cover. The tracks are ballasted, and various shades of ground cover, mostly greens and browns, are spread around the rest of the layout. Looks pretty good for a guy who doesn't claim to be a scenery expert.
The track that I use is American S gauge from California, and it's a code 172 nickel silver solid rail track. It's available in flex track and turnout and sectional track. And we found it to be a very durable. It will not satisfy pure scalers because the rail is large.
The layout is powered by 8 American Flyer transformers made between 1946 and 1950. They total 1,450 watts of power. The wiring is coded and neatly organized. It didn't take Tom long to realize a second level was needed.
The layout was kind of boring before. It was just a flat tabletop. Didn't have any hills. It didn't have any mountains at that time. Also, I wanted to operate more trains. The upper level has added a lot of interest to the layout and accomplished what I set out to do. Most fun for me is the electronics of the layout, the wiring, working under the layout. Originally dealing with conventional wiring and conventional train control, it was a challenge to make the trains do what you wanted them to do. With TMCC and legacy systems, it's a lot easier to do that. But it is still a challenge to adapt the legacy and TMCC systems to two-rail track. I've probably gone fairly far with that. If you notice on the layout, there are over 40 Lehigh Valley model kits. These kits were designed and marketed by Frank Tittman from Allentown, Pennsylvania. Examples of the kits are the coal mine here, coaling station, the sand house, the Angela Bova produce company, combination station and water tower at Emory Gap, concrete plant on the far side of the layout, Jones Coal Company, the lumber company. But I have certainly enjoyed building those kits, and the look of my layout certainly depended on them. And he's always welcomed people to his layout, and he's just a wonderful person. The only concern I have with the old Flyer accessories are most of them are too large. But there are a lot of things that you can do. You can build up steps to them. You can put them in a location where they're next to big commercial industrial buildings, and they fit in quite well. They are adaptable to the new electronic control systems. That makes them much easier to operate on a large layout where access is not as easy on a smaller layout. The future for the hobby is real questionable to me. The younger people in our layout are more into the current production. The thing that gets the most interest is when we put on an Amtrak train, but that's what they know. When we were kids, the trains that we like are what we knew, what we grew up with. I think the biggest hope is that the younger people will develop through the use of electronics. Now, with the AC systems operated by Lionel and MTH, I think the children really get into that.
Most layout builders create an idealized, bucolic version of life, where the homes are all freshly painted and everyone is happy, the way they wish life really was. Greg Annett, an artist, lives about 30 miles west of Detroit and works for the local power company. He was influenced by Edward Hopper's Nighthawks and wanted his layout to reflect the gritty, city, not-so-friendly side of life, the way life really is.
Realism is what I'm out for. The garbage, the boxes, the litter in the back street. You're going to see a part of town that's not real pretty, a few clubs that have sprung up. There's some areas that the police are called to frequently. Yeah, I really want that real America thing, you know. I don't want it to be all just so pleasant.
Greg sees a similarity between laying out a blank canvas and designing a model railroad.
Taking a blank canvas, breaking it into sections and arranging shapes, the equivalent to what you're doing here on a model railroad. Arrange it into a composition that's pleasing to the eye.
Greg painted his homage to Hopper, which he calls Open All Night.
That urban feel that I captured in my painting and incorporated into my layout as well.
Greg was also influenced by master layout builder Norm Charboneau, who also embraced the realistic approach.
I had seen some of his layout on some videos TM Books had produced. I just thought it was fantastic. This is the way we want our layouts to look. The city looked dirty and black. All that grime looked really great. You know, that sense of realism is just, to me, what it's all about.
The L-shaped layout measures 19 feet long by 6 feet wide on one leg and is 17 feet long by 8 feet wide on the other.
I've got a Z4000 MTH transformer, powers the main line and sidings. I've also got it wired that I can run conventional trains. I'm using the DCS system along with a Lionel Cab 1 controller. That of course requires the proper corresponding Lionel base piece to connect with the MTH DCS. But I'm running both Lionel and MTH here.
The number 5324 J1E Hudson with white running boards and white tires looks like it just came out of the Alco shops in Schenectady, New York.
The set we ran today was actually, I think I picked like one car out of some different sets. One of the cars in there was two-tone beige and brown. I think that was a train that ran on the one of the big four main lines. I think it was between Detroit and Chicago. I try to make it look prototypical, you know, instead of running everything so perfect and clean. The other train we ran was, I believe it's nicknamed like a T-motor. It was a New York Central third rail piece that I just got this year. The prototype was run from Harmon Yard down to Grand Central Station. I saw a lot of photos of that engine running through pretty rough neighborhood. So I kind of decided that when I did the layout, I wanted it to resemble areas like that I had seen photos of. I dull coated the cars inside to get rid of the shiny styrene look. Probably bought about 4 or 5 packs of the MTH people and installed them in there.
Greg had a problem with this third rail locomotive.
Fellows at Third Rail were really good because they just sent me another engine right off. I can't say enough about how great they are. Their customer service is there. I was even able to talk with some of the technicians. They were just real helpful. I was at a train show, so here I am trying to sell some things in inventory, and I'm seeing something over here that this other guy's got. He had these two Pennsylvania, I believe they're called BB1s, electrics. I guess they were always run prototypically in pairs. I used to try to keep the railroad, one particular road, and run it prototypically 100% correct. And then I would go into some of the hobby stores, notice some other items in there that I really liked. Couldn't get away from it, so I decided to try to run the engine that I want. I try to follow some rules, like I try to have the proper corresponding caboose with it, try to keep all the freight or any of the rolling stock in that era.
Although the layout is meant to represent a period from 60 years ago, Greg occasionally runs some modern equipment, such as this Canadian National SD70M made by Lionel.
I've just bought what I want, what I like to see run, and I run it through, I guess what I would call here is, typical big town USA. It could be kind of just anywhere, I think, in the East. We also ran this morning a Mikado New York Central, pulling some billboard reefer cars that I had accumulated over the years, just recently weathered. I kind of like the Mikado pulling those because it's all from that appropriate era. It's MTH Mikado. It really smokes well, and I hope we got some great shots of that. I had done weathering originally with just regular hand brushes. Over the years, I've used the airbrush more often. I got more comfortable with the airbrush by weathering a lot of my buildings. It's kind of worked out good that I had that previous practice because, when you start taking a $65, $70 billboard reefer, bright colors, and you start spraying polyscale paint all over them, you kind of want to be sure of the technique you're going to use. The RS3s, those I really liked because, that was an Alco. They ran really loud and rough. I mean, they just I saw pictures of these things when they started up, and you'd swear they're just about ready to explode. I really like the sound on these that MTH did. Speakers are great. I weathered these a couple of years ago. Tried to make the lead locomotive a little cleaner. The freight cars I've weathered at different times with a few different techniques over the years that I've learned. They range from using strangest brushes that you could dream of to create the rust effect by sort of a stippling process. Some airbrushing in spots. It's all kind of an evolutionary process for everyone. Every individual's different and they need to find their comfort level with the weathering. We got a couple of shark nose engines that I have weathered with the airbrush. I'd like to run those with these cars. I kind of like to just run trains. I enjoy seeing them weave through the inner city buildings. I try not to worry too much about having prototypically accurate operating layout. I know there's a lot of fellas that like to have that. I, for the most part, just enjoy watching the trains.
Greg chose MTH Rail King track, but is not thrilled with it.
My track that I've used is MTH Real Track. I'll tell you right off, I don't like it. I think it's junk, and I wouldn't recommend it again. I guess what I really, in all fairness, don't like about it is I think the switches have a spring issue inside of them. Once you get them all down, that spring can pop off, and it will not hold the rail tight as it should. So you really need to super glue those before you put them down. The connectors I'm really not fond of. If you take them apart once or twice, you got to reshape them before you use them again. In most areas, I brought ballast up the sides of the track to cover that transition from the molded ballast to the tabletop. More of that realism again I was going for.
Greg achieved the big city high-rise look by mixing gauges and kit bashing.
Tallest building is called the Ambassador Hotel. The lower part of that is an MTH structure. Found some HO buildings at some shows, sort of stacked them on top of that, creating that Art Deco high-rise look. They do sell a 5-story building. You can take those apart, stack them on top of another. You wind up with pretty nice high-rise.
Greg is passionate about the hobby and outspoken about what is needed.
I don't know if they're rushing their product to market or what. I've had some angry moments when you spend anywhere from $300 to $1,000. You put it on the track and nothing happens, or you get it around once or twice and pinched wire inside, or the headlights flickering for some reason, the boards are bad. The industry really needs to get their act together, I think, on the quality control. You know, they've all got their problems. I think they're just not watching their quality close enough. I would say 1 out of maybe every 5 locomotives has a problem with it, it seems like, in recent years. I don't know if they need to actually get in a plane, fly over there, and watch the people who are assembling these items, or just start opening more when they arrive here in the U.S. But, you know, they really got to get a handle on these.
Greg means for his remarks to be constructive and hopes they serve as a wake-up call for the industry.
There's going to be a million guys out there that are going to be saying, yeah, you tell them, finally someone said something honest.
While it is clear Greg's main priority is to depict life as it really is, occasionally his artist's imagination and sense of whimsy prevail.
The layout features Verner's Soda Pop Factory, Detroit icon. I've also got Higbee Department Store. The main focal point for A Christmas Story, Ralphie he wanted to get that BB gun. Yeah, I'm kind of happy with the layout, how it's turned out. I've been at it for 8 years. I've gotten across everything that I think I've seen in real life that I wanted to recreate here, which I guess is the driving force. People who do anything, who tell stories or write books, paint, you want to recreate something that you've seen that you like to see again. And that's what I do. I try to recreate scenes that I just enjoy seeing in real life.
Bob Olsen built this layout, including the track, trolley, scenery, and buildings, from scratch.
This layout that I have come up with, this sort of developed over time.
Like most layouts, this one is located in the basement, which in this case has a few corners and alcoves.
My basement is about 38 feet long and 12 to 15, 16, about 15 feet wide. There's one little kind of alcove that goes off of it. But the major section, of course, is approximately 12 by 14. So section is the Brooklyn city side. And then you try to merge it into a suburban and or interurban country look there. So once you get around a bend, you're actually now in western Pennsylvania. First of all, I wanted to capture the essence of New York City. You try to compress as much stuff as you can in a space I have.
A realistic elevated platform station sits in the foreground of the Brooklyn side of the layout. Trains powered by an outside third rail pass on the upper level, while trolleys powered by an overhead catenary system pass on the street level. Dust and muted colors combine to provide a realistic, gritty appearance to the inner city atmosphere. While details such as the railings and lattice work of the elevated supports are scratch-built, the inclusion of model people and Corgi model automobiles are exceptions. A large, multi-level model of Brooklyn Manhattan Transit Corporation's Sand Street Station, which was in New York from 1888 to 1944, is the centerpiece of the Brooklyn side of the layout. As the layout moves west, the elevated section loops around a small city scene. The street-level trolleys also run around apartments and storefronts. Continuing westerly, the big city setting transitions to a small town with interurban service. Streetcars with their electric motors buzz through, bringing workers and shoppers to their various destinations. More of Bob's scratch-built and kit-bashed structures provide the scenery. The cement roads were created using Durham's water putty, which takes a bit longer to set up than plaster of Paris, providing Bob with more time to sculpt in detail as needed. Brickwork is etched into the putty and painted, with a dark wash made of black paint added, then wiped over to bring out the details and weather the surface. Around a curve, one line begins its ascent up the mountainside in Pennsylvania. The lower level heads to a small town. A sturdy trestle bridge is the centerpiece of the scenic countryside.
The hills in western Pennsylvania, remind me of Pittsburgh Railway or West Penn Railways. They had some very unique operations there, very steep grades, as much as 10 to 12% grades, which they almost need a cog into operated. I try to at least have something that represents an interurban type configuration there. So there's an upper and lower part. It has been changed several times. I had a tunnel in there one time that now becomes a waterfall. There's quite a transition there. I'm a retired science teacher. I tried to incorporate some different rock types. I incorporated some real rock. It works out very nicely. Of course, in the one of the things, this is well known for, I think, most of the hobby, that if you use Celotex tile, you just sort of break it, you don't cut it, you just kind of break it off. It has the illusion of shale-type rock, stratified type rock there. So there's all kinds of different illusions, and of course you can even do the tilting of the rock, the synclines and so forth. I chose fall as my season, well, mostly because you have so much variety of color in there. You could have something that looks like just a green background with no character to it, and it seems like fall gives you the best sense of what you can do with different types of foliage and so forth.
Bob also incorporates dried rootstock to represent the occasional dead tree in the midst of colorful living trees.
Also on the walls, I kind of painted a thunderstorm on one side. It goes from nimbus clouds, cumulus nimbus, to cumulus, to more just fair weather alto cumulus. And the other end, you've got some cirrus clouds. So in other words, you have the return flow of a typical weather pattern. The only problem is it's in the reverse order. It's just the way it happened. Normally weather comes from the west, goes to the east. Well, my weather is a little different, so it goes the opposite direction. So don't get too picky.
Bob meticulously crafts his own trolleys. He's developed several tricks, many of which save money by purchasing inexpensive materials and fashioning parts out of them. For instance, household items such as a serrated tracing wheel is used to press rivet detail into a sheet of metal. He custom builds trolleys for hobbyists as well.
When you're building, there is a satisfaction of doing things.
At a casual glance, this layout appears to be 2-rail O scale.
Technically, I guess I would be called 3-rail, because I'm using the third rail as the overhead wire or the side third rail on the L. When you deal with the catenary or the overhead wire, the hangers, of course, they're commercially available. They're very good hangers, to solder to. They look very good. They, I think, do a very good job, and they're reasonably priced too. But anyway, the metal type pole, what I basically is telescoping tubing, and the center solid part inside is just weld rod or brazing rod. And for the wood poles, I basically use 1/4-inch dowel rod. All the ties that are exposed, I just simply cut on a table saw. You just slice them into the basic shapes in there. It's amazing. Within an hour, I can have 1,000 or more ties. And, they're basically stained out and, then just glued in place and just, spike them in there. If you want a dark ballast, the cheapest way to go, you can have ballast that you could probably do 100 different layouts. You just go down to one of the supply stores, get a bag of the black sandy material they use for, sandblasting.
Finally, we come to the other end of the layout, representing hundreds of miles away from Brooklyn, New York.
The town that's right behind me is actually just a typical, I would call it a town that you might find in western Pennsylvania, like Connorsville or Brownstown. But it, just gives you the sense of the operation in a rural 1930s type setting there. So. I don't consider it a layout. I think of it as a three-dimensional art. It's like I'm trying to capture a period of time which no longer exists. Time passes you by.